Okay, everyone, thanks for joining today's roundtable session. Um, Prior to the start of Voyages, we like to dedicate our roundtables to talking about, what can you expect in your voyage. So this session is going to be all about your voyage. We'll go through, how teams are formed, what to expect. We'll walk through the Scrum Agile framework a bit. And more than anything, I want to take any questions you have. So at any point when you have a question, feel free to ask it in the voice channel, or you can go to the Town Hall voice chat uh, and type it there. And I'm monitoring that, and I'll be sure to answer your question. So one question that's come up before we get started is it deliberate that we are getting multiple reminders to fill out the Voyage commitment form? The answer is absolutely not. I'll look into that to see why you're getting that, and hopefully, if I solve it for you, I'll be able to solve that issue for everyone. We have a little bit of automation that runs that does the emailing, and it really sounds like something has gone amiss in that. Um, so thanks for letting me know that, by the way. Um, so I'm just going to pause. I see someone else is typing, and oh, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. Okay, so so that's what happened. Yeah, so this is happening to more than one person. I'll take a look at that. I apologize for that error. All right, let's get started. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. Um, and let's just dive right in. Uh, what is a voyage? What does a voyage look like? That's one question we get, quite frequently. Well, basically, a voyage consists of six 1 week long sprints. And each of these sprints has a specific goal or an objective. So we're using sprints and instead of saying just week one, week two, week three, because we're following the Scrum uh, Agile framework. And a sprint is unique to, well, I shouldn't say that. It's maybe not unique, but it's been popularized by Scrum. So in your first two sprints, they're all about setting up the foundation for what follows. So you can think of sprint one as that place where you meet your team, you get to know one another. You talk about how you start that discussion of how you're going to work together. Um, the other thing that is the objective of sprint is that you want to create or you want to choose a project and you want to create your vision statement. And then lastly, you want to define and prioritize the application features that are going to go into your minimum viable product, or what we call your MVP. Now, when I say choose a project, it's going to be really easy for tier one and tier two teams. Um, if you're in tier one or tier two, you will have to create the project that we provide. We will give you requirements and specifications when the voyage starts for the project we want you to build. Now, if you're a tier three team, you have a choice. You can build the project that we provide, or you can choose a project of your own. Just one caution is I've seen a lot of teams really struggle with trying to decide on, what project do they want to build. And in some cases, I've seen that it takes teams up until sprint three before they've decided on what they want to create. And that's really too much time. You know, if you haven't decided on what you're going to build until sprint three, let's say that that's at the beginning of sprint three. Well, now you only have 4 weeks or four sprints in which to do everything. And so you've already eliminated 2 weeks of available time out of your schedule. So that's something to watch out for. And it sounds very basic, but I've seen this over and over and over again. I've also seen teams who tend to argue about what project are we going to build. And again, these are tier three teams. I would advise any team that if you're having trouble choosing what to build, then by default use the requirements and specifications we've provided. It really doesn't matter what you build, because the value you get from a voyage isn't the application, it's what you learn from building the application. So whatever you build, you're going to learn a lot. You're going to end up knowing more at the end of the voyage than you did at the beginning of the voyage. Now that takes us back to, again, this overall goal. You know, the goal of the voyage is to work together to build an app, to basically build experience. Everyone that applies for a job comes to that job or comes to that interview process with a similar amount of technical skills. What sets people apart, though, when they're interviewing is not just the technical skill they have, but the experience they have at using the tools to build the app, using the languages, frameworks, and databases and whatnot, but also using things like the agile methodology. That's what will set you apart from other job applicants. And that's really, really important in this particular job market. It's a very difficult job market. So it's difficult to get interviews. So you want to maximize your chances of getting to at least the second interview and ultimately landing the job. You want to do whatever you can to meet that goal. So we talked about sprint one. That's really it's meeting your team, uh, uh, and then defining and prioritizing the features in your MVP, the features of your application. Now in sprint two, your objective, what you'll do is you will take that prioritized list of MVP features and you'll break that down into actual what we call backlog work items or work items. Um, that's a checklist of, okay, what do you have to do to actually build a running app? That's what the backlog is. So you'll set up that project backlog. And so, for example, an MVP feature might be something as simple as we want to provide the user with a profile screen they can use uh, to update their telephone number, their address, personal kinds of information, their username, that type of thing. Well, there's a lot of tasks behind that. If you're a tier three team, actually, if you're any team, you have to have some type of data store, whether it be a database or a JSON file of some type. You've got to have a place to maintain that data. So that requires designing the data structure, creating test data, populating that test data, um, writing the profile screen, which typically that's not just one task. If you think about it, a profile screen, it's going to have an add or an add, update, and delete functionality. So that could be three separate tasks right there. So basically, those MVP features turn into multiple tasks in your backlog. Now, the other thing that you'll want to create in Sprint 2 is a low fidelity wireframe. That's basically the design for your UI and your UX. And then finally, you'll want to set up your team workflow. You'll need to talk about things like, well, how are you going to do PR reviews? And how will you name your working branches in your repo? When will you have team meetings? All of those kinds of things. So that's what we mean by set up your team workflow. Now, in many cases, what happens is, there are teams that take 2 full sprints to get these 7 steps done. And there's absolutely no problem with that. However, there are some teams that only require a single sprint to get that done. So what we recommend is as soon as you complete all the requirements for a given sprint, don't stop. Start the next sprint immediately. Because what you'll learn in this project and other projects as well is that time is always your worst enemy. Management isn't your worst enemy, and end users aren't your worst enemy, and bugs aren't your worst enemy. It's the time that it takes, to do the coordination and to fix problems and to write the code and, do all the things you have to do to create a working app. Now, once you've completed these 7 foundational steps, uh, sprints 3 through 5 are reserved for basically designing individual functions, writing the code to implement them, and unit testing them. And we'll talk about the Scrum flow and actually how you do that a little bit later. But basically, sprint 3 through 5 is where you actually get the work done. Now, in sprint 6, if you have some type of problem you've encountered, you can certainly continue to work on features in sprint 6. If you need that time, it's there. However, it's really a good idea to try to complete your MVP by the end of sprint 5, and then you can use sprint 6 to polish your application. You can maybe do a little more testing. You can make sure that the UI and the UX doesn't have any confusion about it, that it's very clear and easy for users to use. You could make sure that your README, for example, is up to date. Every project needs a well-written README. And we're actually going to have a roundtable in the coming weeks on how to write a well-written README. So in a nutshell, I've gone really fast, I realize that, but this is really what a voyage consists of. And we're going to dive a little bit deeper, but I want to pause to see if there's any questions or comments. Okay, well, let's move on then. At any point, feel free to interrupt me. And again, you can speak in the voice channel or you can type comments and questions in the Town Hall voice chat as well. All right, so a question that comes up, kind of a procedural question that comes up quite frequently is how do we form teams? And what does a team look like? So the first thing to talk about are the roles. In a team, based on our ideal team will be 1 product owner, 1 Scrum Master, 1 UI UX designer, 1 data scientist, and then 4 or more web developers, and then possibly optionally a Voyage guide. Now, all of these, except for the web developers, these are based on the number of people who sign up for a Voyage. For example, if we don't get enough people who sign up as a product owner, your team may not have a product owner. And so that means that you and your team, one of the things you'll have to talk about at that initial team kickoff meeting is how are you going to handle the lack of a product owner? Are you going to split that work up, or will someone volunteer to do it? And the same is true for a Scrum Master and actually a UI UX designer. For UI UX designers, if your team doesn't have one, what I'd recommend is, pardon me one second. What I'd recommend is going to the handbook, and I'll show you the section. On the landing page of the handbook, if you scroll all the way down, there is a technical resource called UI UX Workflow. And this is intended for teams who don't have a UI UX designer. So this basically shows you a typical UI UX kind of workflow. Now, you don't have to strictly follow this. If you tried to learn and everything you need to know to do a full UI UX workflow, it's going to take you more than 6 weeks. It may not take you more than 6 weeks to learn the basics of UI UX, but to do that plus create your application, yeah, you're going to run the danger of taking more than 6 sprints. But this resource is there, and it shows you basically what are all these things that a UI UX designer does, and how might you do them. So it's basically a set of resources you could follow. Any questions? Now, the same is actually true in the handbook. If you don't have a product owner, if you go to the Voyage section of the handbook, and if you scroll down to the really to this Voyage process section, following this list of tasks, which we've broken down by what's the objective, how do you go about doing them, and then there's a list of resources. If you follow this, these are the things that your product owner and Scrum Master will help coordinate. So this is a really good resource if you're on a team that doesn't have a product owner or Scrum Master. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb, but I believe in Voyage 54, I believe every team has either a product owner or a Scrum Master. So I think we're going to be pretty lucky in Voyage 54 in that respect. Now, if you're a data scientist, in Voyage 54, I don't believe we have enough data scientists to form a data science only team. So someone on the admin team will reach out to you through Discord DM to ask you if you want to be placed in a web development team. And if you find if you find that you're in that situation, I think a really good value that a data scientist could add to a web team is to look at the data they're collecting or the data that they're working with, and to work with them on ways to visualize that data, or maybe to draw out other meaning from the raw data. So that's what I would suggest for data scientists in a web development team. Web developers, I'm not even going to go over that because I think we all know what a web developer does. Again, there will be a minimum of 4 web developers on every team, and there could be as many as 5 or 6. The last role on this chart is the Voyage Guide. Voyage Guides are experienced Chingus who have volunteered 1 to 2 hours a week of their time to basically be a resource that a team can go to ask questions of. So if you're on a team and you've got maybe a really difficult problem you're dealing with, or a very difficult question, and you've tried to solve it and you can't, you can go to your Voyage Guide that's assigned to your team, and that person will try to help out. Now, we've advised the Voyage Guides, we don't want them just to give you the answer. What we want is for them to show you how to get the answer, because that's actually a skill that's going to be far more valuable to you in your career than you just asking a question and then giving a black and white kind of answer. Now, you're probably thinking, well, when the voyage starts, how do I know who's on my team? Well, in this case, or in the case of a voyage, One of the resources we provide is a dedicated Discord channel just for you and your team. Now, um, in that channel, there will be multiple topics, but one of the topics is a team info topic. And in that, we'll list a directory of who's in the team, what is their Discord name, what time zone are they in, and what role are they in. And that way you'll know who's on your team at the start of the voyage. The other little bit of information that's in there is the link to the repo that contains the requirements and specifications for the project that we've designed. Um, Voyage guides are not agile coaches, unfortunately. Someone just typed that in the chat. Um, so voyage guides are more technical. Now, in many cases, a voyage guide can answer questions about how does, about Scrum in particular, but they are not agile coaches. Um, and actually, for product owners and Scrum masters, we do have an agile leadership team, and they will be reaching out to you on a weekly basis to ask you if you have questions or problems or anything about Agile or Scrum that they can help with. So this is a team of 3 people that are led by Bahara, and they are product owner coaches, Scrum Master coaches. They've got all the certifications, plus they've got quite a bit of deep experience, not just knowledge, but the real world kind of experience to help out. So again, voyage guides are typically more technical. Oh, no worries. I'm glad you asked that, Doris. That's probably something I should make a note to talk about. So going back to product owners and Scrum Masters, there's one additional role you might see, or teammate you might see in your team. You will see a primary product owner and or a primary Scrum Master. So those are the product owners and Scrum Masters that are really have the responsibility for coordinating your team's activities. They are not bosses. They are not managers. At Chingu, everybody is at one level. We don't have a management structure. However, there are some individuals that are, you can think of them as in training. They're still working on things like their product owner certification or their Scrum Master certification. So we will add a maximum of 1 shadow product owner or 1 shadow Scrum Master to your team. And there'll only be 1 shadow. For example, if you have a product owner and a Scrum Master, you might have a shadow product owner, and in that case, you would not have a shadow Scrum Master or vice versa. But basically, they are passive members of the team. They're there to observe the primary product owner and Scrum Master to learn from them. And the primary product owner and Scrum Masters are there to help mentor them, to answer questions. And they may actually assign them a work to do in the voyage. For example, a Scrum Master might assign a shadow Scrum Master to lead the sprint planning session for sprint 4. They would observe and again coach, but it's a way to allow these folks to build up their experience, slowly at a measured pace. Now, the formation rules that we follow in your teams, everyone will be in the same tier. We don't mix tiers. The other thing you can count on is we try really hard to keep everyone on the team within 3 time zones of anyone else on the team. Sometimes there are exceptions to this. For example, if you look at a world map and you look at Asia, Asian countries, especially ones like Indonesia, while it's not an Asian country, but Australia, New Zealand, they are spread out quite a bit over the Pacific Ocean. So they span a large number of time zones. So sometimes it's not possible for us to um, enforce this rule we have that team members be within 3 time zones of one another. However, if we have to go to 4 time zones, we will let the person in the furthest time zone know, and we'll ask them if they're able to work in a team that's spread out a little more. I will say from time to time we've had people tell us, "Oh, I realize I'm in New Zealand, and the only team with an opening is in the Netherlands, in the Eastern or the Western EU, but I'm willing to work late at night." And what we've found in literally, 85% of the cases is that doesn't work. People just get tired. I wouldn't want to get up in the middle of the night to attend meetings and whatnot. Um, so that's why we actually are pretty strict about the time zone rule. The third thing we match on is your technical preference. So if you say that you're JavaScript and React, you can pretty much guarantee that we're going to put you in a team with other JavaScript and React developers. Um, and again, if there's some difference, sometimes we see people who list their primary language as Python and their secondary is JavaScript. If we see that and there's no Python teams, we'll match you with a JavaScript team. Now, if you list your primary language as Python, or you list it as say Ruby, and you have no other languages listed, we will reach out to you before we put you in a JavaScript team. And then the last thing we match on is your pairing requests. Um, you may have noticed on that Voyage sign up form, there's a spot where you can request, "Hey, I want to be paired up with Andres because I want to learn Go." Um, we try to honor that, but something that takes a higher priority is the tier and the time zone. If I've signed up to work with without saying I want to work with Andres and he's 6 time zones away from me and in a different tier, we won't match you up. So yeah, you've been trying to get me to learn Go and NeoVim for a long time. And then lastly, just you may see that you're on a team that has between 4 and sometimes even 10 teammates. Those are fairly large teams, but it's because of the fact that there are different roles represented on a team. And you might be asking, well, golly, isn't that confusing? And isn't that a fairly large team? Well, actually, 4 to 10 people, 4 to 9 people on a team in the real world isn't that large of a team. Uh, it's more average, um, and uh, we include these different roles because we want this to be as close to what you'll encounter on a real job as possible. Oh, thank you for answering that, Andres. Yeah, we will start Voyage 54 no later than 11:59 a.m. Chicago time. And if you look in the V54 announcements channel, you'll see the time listed there. And it will be listed in your local time zone or whatever local time zone you've set up in Discord. Pardon me. So any questions on team formation? I realize I'm throwing a lot of information at you. I'm going to restructure this presentation. It'll have the same information, but there are better ways to present this, I think. Okay, let's move on then. All right, so what's required to be successful in a voyage? And how the way we define successful is that you complete your MVP, and you've learned a lot. And also, success means that you've worked outside your comfort zone, which means there are going to be mistakes made in the voyage. But at Chingu, if you haven't realized this or seen this already, we really welcome mistakes. We want Chingu to be a place where you're free to make a mistake and to learn from it. Um, when you get out on a job, mistakes aren't always tolerated. Uh, so you try to, I mean, we always try to avoid mistakes, but mistakes can be very stressful on a real job. Um, at Chingu, we want you to have that freedom to basically not have that kind of stress. So the first things that's required is be respectful and support your teammates. Number one, that means don't ghost your teammates. You need to attend meetings and you need to post your status daily in your team channel. And if for some reason you have to be unavailable, it's pretty easy just to let your team know. It's okay to not be available. What's not okay is to not tell your team, to have them guessing about where you're at. So let your team know what's going on. Also, plan on 8 to 12 hours a week. Um, Voyages are difficult, and they are difficult by design, but you'll find, once you get out into the job market, you'll find that the voyage well, actually, you'll find that the jobs in the job market are 10 times as difficult as a voyage. So our job is to try to prepare you for that, quote, real world. Now, even though I said an average of 8 to 12 hours a week, we know that people have lives and jobs and family, that there may be weeks in which you aren't able to put in 8 hours. Again, what's important isn't the fact that, oh, you didn't have that amount of time to work. What's important is you let your team know that you didn't have that time, and that you don't volunteer to complete more tasks than you can reasonably complete given your availability. I've seen, in fact, I've kind of done this myself, where I tend to be a little bit of an overachiever, and I will take on tasks because I'm optimistic. So I might take on, say, oh, well, I can complete these 4 tasks, but they're 4 major tasks. And the probability of me actually being able to complete them in a single week is not the best. So it's really good to, try to gauge and try to learn what is your own pace. What's the uh, what makes a task something that you're able to reasonably complete? That's something to learn during the voyage. And so as you gain that experience, you only want to sign up to complete complete what you can reasonably expect to finish in a sprint. Now, some people get a little excited and they say, well, what happens if I finish early? Well, that's not a problem. If you finish a task early, let your team know, and you can do a mini sprint planning session and pick out another task for you to start work on to finish out the rest of that sprint. You'll find that Scrum, Agile as well, but Scrum in particular, it's really structured to welcome. It welcomes change, and it reacts to changing conditions. It allows you to adjust your plans based on changes. So that means it's not as rigid as other project management systems. Now, the next thing that's really critical is practice active listening, communication, and collaboration. Um, some of you that have been here a while, I know you've heard me say this before. You're probably sick of hearing me say it, but it's the truth. Communication and collaboration on a daily basis are more important to your success as a team than technical skill. Technical skills are uh, reasonably, I won't say easy, but you can pick up new technical skills fairly quickly. You may not be able to be an expert quickly, but you can learn how to use something fairly quickly. But it's way different for communication and collaboration. That is a people skill, and humans are the most complex machines there are. So, uh, making sure that your team knows what you're doing, uh, making sure that you collaborate to help your teammates and that they help you, that's really more important than any technical skill. So, at a minimum, pardon me, you'll need to hold a weekly sprint planning meeting. And we'll talk about this. We're going to show a diagram on the next slide to put it into perspective. But this is where you look at your project backlog. This is the project backlog is the list of everything that has to be done to reach your MVP. You look at that and you decide, what is it that you need to complete in this particular sprint? And once you've decided as a team, you've decided what are those tasks, then individuals can volunteer to work on a task. And it's perfectly okay if two people volunteer to work on the same task. It could be that you have a really complex task. It may take two people to work through it to get it done. Now, I'm going to defer this discussion of review and retrospective and until the next slide. The next thing that's required is every Sunday morning Chicago time, before noon Chicago time, we'll publish in we'll broadcast a message in your team channel with a link to the weekly check-in form. Um, that check-in form, we ask that you complete it. It's your way of telling us how do you as an individual feel about your team's progress. You can share with us what your successes are. You can also share what problems you may be encountering in the voyage. We use these check-ins both to provide coaching to you and also to improve the voyages. Um, and I'll give you an example of that. One of actually, it's been several times in Voyage 53, we had check-ins that where the comment was made, the check-in form is too complex. So as a result, any of you that may have been in a prior voyage, you're going to notice that the check-in form is much simpler in Voyage 54 than what it is or what it had been in prior voyages. It has fewer questions, and the questions will be a little simpler. Now, just real briefly, you have until, and we'll tell you this in all of our messages, but uh, we'll send the check-in form request on Sunday mornings or Sundays. You'll have until Monday to complete it, Monday at midnight. So you have at least, almost 36 hours to complete it. And then on Tuesday, for anyone that fills out any of the long text description of what's right or what's wrong in the voyage, we will reply through a direct message in Discord. We'll give you some coaching. And then on Tuesday night, based upon your overall assessment of how the voyage is going, we ask you to rate it as being green, yellow, or red. We email some generic advice specific to that sprint. And then the final thing on what's required is follow the Scrum framework. We're here, as I said, we're here to refine technical skills, but we really want to prepare you for the job market. And since most organizations that consider themselves to be agile are using Scrum, that's why we push Scrum, and that's why we use Scrum. Following Scrum at Chingu is not an option, it's a requirement. And basically, well, in fact, rather than going into the details, let's go to the next slide, and I'll show you what Scrum is. And thank you for your comments. I have been following. Uh, oops. Sorry. As someone noted, I have two 4-month-old puppies, and they are a handful. All right. So this is the basic Scrum flow. And this is not everything in Scrum. This is the simplest flow that can still be called Scrum. We didn't want to throw everything and have you learn 100% of Scrum right from the beginning. So what this flow does and what Scrum does is it focuses your attention on what needs to be done in any given sprint. So that's why the first step in Scrum is the sprint planning session, which looks at the product backlog, chooses the tasks that need to be completed in that particular sprint, and then you'll focus on those tasks in that sprint. Now, again, the flow of that sprint planning session is that you'll choose those tasks as a team. And then you won't worry about who's going to do what task at that point. Once you've chosen all the tasks, then as a team, as team members, you can review them in the meeting, and you can volunteer. You can say, "Oh, well, you know what? That one really matches my skills quite a bit. I'd like to do that one." Now, once you've completed that sprint planning session, now you're ready to start coding. Basically, the remainder of the sprint is going to be you as an individual team member um, taking a task at a time that you volunteered for and doing the detailed design, the coding, and the unit testing of that particular task. Now, I'm going to skip it. I do want to talk about PR and deployment, but um, Andres had noted about combining meetings. There are two other meetings that occur in the sprint. At the sprint planning is at the beginning of the sprint. And we strongly suggest you want to try to schedule this one time as a repeating meeting at the same time and the same day, starting in sprint 2 through sprint 6. That just makes it easy. It's really difficult if you're trying to schedule an individual meeting, for each week. Pardon me. Um, But that meeting typically figure an hour to an hour and a half. Now, at the end of the sprint, there are two other meetings. One is the sprint review, where uh, you would review in the real world, you will review the changes you've made to the application. You'd review the running application with your end users to get immediate feedback. Now, since we don't have real end users at Chingu, what you'll do is as a team, you'll review it, but you'll do it from the perspective of an end user. This review shouldn't be about technology. It doesn't matter what database you're using or what front end framework. This is really all about what does the end user see and how does the application actually run for an end user. And that's really quite valuable because if you can do it with a real end user, what you're doing is you're getting that immediate feedback. You don't have to wait until the end of the project when they see it for the first time, which has been the case in older project management methodologies, to get some type of feedback. That's why a lot of projects have failed in the past, uh, who have used those older project management methodologies because the end users didn't see the result until the end of the project. Now, the other meeting, which I think is actually one of the more valuable ones in Scrum is the sprint retrospective. That is strictly for the development team. And it's a meeting where basically you look at how you interact with one another and how you work together. And what you're looking for are ways to improve. So the retrospective meeting is what allows teams to get better and better sprint after sprint after sprint. Now, you're not just looking for problems here, you're also looking for things that you're doing really well as a team because you want to make sure you don't change that, or at least that you're very careful about changing something that's working very, very well. Now, what Andres had noted, which is true, is that having three meetings is sometimes it's a bit much for Voyage teams. One option you could do is you could combine the sprint review and the sprint retrospective for the prior sprint into the beginning of the sprint planning session for the current sprint. That way you schedule one meeting and you might schedule it for 2 hours. So you'd use the first 15 minutes for the sprint review, the second 15 minutes for the retrospective, and then the remaining time for the sprint planning session. That way you can have one meeting rather than three meetings. Now, there is a fourth meeting or another meeting that I suggest you consider that I found very valuable when I was doing Voyages. And I found very valuable on any project, actually. And that is to schedule an ad hoc meeting, basically a meeting that occurs every week at the same time, but it has no set topic or subject. It's a meeting that you can use as a team. Let's say there's a problem that arises. Well, you can use it as like a big pair programming session to work on that problem together. Or I have seen teams that have used it for knowledge transfer. If there's been no issues, really nothing to talk about, one member of the team will use that to try to teach other members of the team about something they may not have been exposed to or they may not know. So that can be really valuable. The third thing you could use that ad hoc meeting for, especially if you schedule it for like a Thursday, later in the sprint. Let's say that you complete all of the sprint backlog items by Thursday. Well, then you can use that meeting as a second sprint planning session to decide, okay, what is it we're going to do next? So that way you're not wasting time. Now, something I skipped over is this PR and deploy. This is something that is probably, I think it's the hardest thing for teams to adapt to in Scrum. In Scrum, any changes that you make, that you complete in a sprint, you need to deploy to production at the end of that sprint. So that means you need, if let's say I've had the task I volunteered for to build that profile page, if I've completed that, I've completed my unit testing, I've PR'd it up to the development branch. I need to now, once it's integration tested there, I need to work with the team to promote that to main to basically get it into production. And we'll talk about this at the next roundtable. We're going to talk about Git and GitHub and how to use them as a team. We're going to take a deep dive into that PR process. Pardon me. But as Andre said and Kesusha seconded, this is something you really need to do as early as possible. Even if you've just got a landing page with some lorem ipsum text on it, deploy it. And take it one step further. Deploy your development branch to the internet and also deploy your main branch as a separate instance in your web host to the internet. That way, the development branch, by deploying it, that gives you a place to do integration testing. But more importantly, when you deploy to to the main branch in each sprint, if you do that early, if you encounter a deployment issue, it's going to be much easier to resolve because those issues will happen incrementally over different sprints. So there'll be smaller issues, much easier to resolve. In almost every voyage, I run into teams that wait until sprint 6 or sprint 5 to deploy. So they're deploying when their application, if it's not fully completed, it's almost completed. So there's a lot of code there. Well, those deployment issues get really difficult to resolve. And so it creates uh, a a really bad situation because now you're in a stressful situation because now you're faced with a really complex problem when you're running out of time when you're at the end of the voyage. So any questions? And to kind of the notes that are or the posts that people are putting in the town hall voice chat, Chingu, we don't we make a point not to tell teams what tools to use. So if you want to use Vercel or Railway or Render or Heroku or you name it to as a web host, we don't care. Our only really requirement is use whatever tools you decide to use or whatever services, make sure they have a free tier. We don't want any Chingu to have to pay or join a paid tier in order to complete a voyage. And there are plenty of solutions out there with free tiers. And if anyone here is a product owner or a scrum master, the same is true for your tools. You're free to use, Jira, Trello, GitHub projects, Miro, ClickUp. It doesn't matter. Just make that a team decision. Uh, but once you've agreed on a tool, make sure it has a free tier or a free plan, I should say. So any questions? I love the comments. That's pretty helpful. That people who have been this through this before are sharing what they've learned, and I think that makes a big difference. All right, if there are no questions, we'll move forward then. So again, a little bit more on some specific tactics on how to be successful. Well, one is don't discount the voyage guide or the voyage topic in the handbook. I mean, the handbook has a lot of really good information in it. I would say, look at the structure of the handbook, get familiar with the topics that are in it. Um, for example, under our guides for our programs, the voyage is just one of our programs. This is where you'll find all of the information about a voyage. Most of what we've talked, actually, all of what we've talked about here is in this document. Personally, I think one of the more valuable parts of these questions at the very top on how to prepare for your voyage. These are different kind of subtopics with questions that people often have. But if you scroll below that part on the landing page, uh, these three items, this helpful information, there's information on how to be a good teammate. There's information about for POs and Scrum Masters, project resources. And then finally, there's more technical information. Uh, let's see, I want to answer this question. I understand the Scrum schedule for voyages when it comes to development, but do you suggest any specific changes or its formula on week one when people are just meeting each other, thinking about what to work on? Yeah, what I would say is you don't want to, let's go back to that diagram actually. You don't want to wait. You don't want to wait on the end of sprint one to start the sprint two tasks. If you've found that, hey, we've completed these four tasks and maybe we've completed it on Thursday of sprint one, well, don't wait until the start of the next sprint, which would be a Monday. Sprints run from Monday to Sunday. Don't wait till the next Monday to start sprint two. Start sprint two right away. And that is true for same advice is true for any of the sprints. Um, you never want to waste time. Um, because if you're doing it this way, if you're making good progress and you finish your MVP in, let's say, the beginning of sprint five, well, that gives you almost two full sprints in which to look at, okay, maybe there's another feature we want to add, or maybe there's more, maybe there's some different UI UX work we need to do in the existing app to make it even better. So you can use that extra time to further enhance the application you've created. And if you're communicating and collaborating, in the team channel, uh, you can do that I should say you can do that asynchronously in the team channel, but you don't have to wait for the next sprint planning session either. Um, you can always schedule a meeting with your teammates. And I'm glad you brought that up because let's look at one other point in the Voyage guide or the Voyage section of the handbook. Down at the very end, there's a list of tips and tricks. There we go. One of those is how do you make a voice channel for your team? So it's really easy to do a real-time meeting. You can schedule, you don't even have to schedule these. You just go to this create voice channel and select your team and or select your channel and boom, right away you've got an ad hoc real-time meeting channel, voice channel and video channel with screen sharing that only your team can use. Again, that's at the end of the Voyage topic or Voyage page in the handbook. So good, good. I'm glad you raised that. Thank you. And I hope that answered that well enough. Any other questions or concerns for that matter? Those are always valid. I'm just going to pause. I see Snowbites is typing. So anyway, while we're waiting, go ahead and make sure you become familiar with that Voyage section of the handbook. You don't need to read it from beginning to end or memorize it, but it's really good to understand the general flow of the Voyage. The steps that occur inside the sprints. Let's see. What if a team can't finish all the requirements during the Voyage? In that case, don't worry about it. Uh, Go ahead and submit what you have. Okay. Uh, we're fairly liberal about judging the projects, um, and in fact, what I would rather see is an application that's uh, error free. It has no bugs. It has no unintended side effects in the UI UX. It's very clear and easy to use. I'd rather see that uh, than an application that has 100 features, but only two of them work. Let's see. AR said, has everyone signed up who signed up been placed in a team? I'm concerned about not being placed in a team uh, due to only being available in the evenings. Actually, don't worry about that. Most teams work in the evenings as opposed to working through the day. But again, even if you're in a team where some people work through the day and some are in the evening, again, that team channel allows you to work asynchronously. What you would have to do is find a point, in between the day and the night time where you can have a real time meeting where you can do your sprint planning or any other real time meeting for that matter. Now, your first question, we are still in the process of assigning people to teams. And we will, if there's, pardon me, we will send out an email on, it'll probably be Saturday. If we are unable to place someone in a team, we'll email you and let you know. And you will be waitlisted so that if there's any openings that pop up within the first two sprints of Voyage 54, we'll do our best to place you then. Otherwise, you'll have to sign up again in Voyage 55. Now, if you've completed well, you have completed your solo project if you've signed up for the Voyage, but uh, once you've completed that solo project, there's no need to create a new solo project for any future voyage. Okay. That's only required prior to your first voyage. So don't worry about that. You won't have to repeat that work if we can't get you in. And then the other part of this is if you are placed in a team, we won't tell you what team you're in, but we will email you on Saturday to let you know that you've been positively placed in a team in Voyage 54. So one way or the other, you will know if you're in the voyage or not. So let's see. Yeah, and what Andre said, it's really good to let your team know what your schedule is, and especially if your schedule changes in every sprint, which it could. Um, just let them know what's going on. The worst thing is to ghost a team. One other thing we do every Sunday when we're doing sending out those voyage check-in requests, we look to see who's been active and inactive in their team channel in Discord. Anyone who hasn't posted a message from the prior Monday to the following Sunday, we'll email you with a notice that says if you don't re-engage with your team in the team channel within 24 hours, we will remove you from the voyage. Um, and we do that because we found that teams tend to try and wait on people who aren't communicating, and it just slows the entire team down. So if someone's not communicating for a long period of time, we unfortunately we remove them. Um, the other thing we do is that if you don't post at least every 3 days in your team channel, we'll also email a reminder that just says, "Hey, we've noticed you haven't posted. You need to re-engage." So let's see. One sprint is 4 weeks. No, it's weekly. One sprint equals 1 week.